some duties, some lots, and who is this prince? Today, on another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Today, we're going through Ezekiel chapter 44 and 45. And tomorrow, we're going through Ezekiel chapter 46 all the way through 48, the end of it, to finish up Ezekiel. After 17 days of Ezekiel, it'll probably be about time on it. So, today is going to be about some things that at moments it seems to be troublesome to Christians as a people. And it is a lot of this book of Ezekiel, and especially this section, is a lot of the reasons why Jewish people say Christianity is wrong. So let's get into it and let's see what we can find out today. What's going to happen? So we get to chapter 44. And chapter 44 is about the prince's privilege. It's about the Levitical duties and privileges of the Levites and the priests' duties and their privileges as well. So we start out here when we're finished in chapter 43. After the ceremony for the consecration of the altar had ended, the guide here has brought Ezekiel back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, the one that faced the east, right? So then the Lord informed the prophet that the gate was to remain closed because the God of Israel had entered through it, giving it a special degree of holiness, so to speak. So you get to verse 3, and we are introduced to this new character. And this new character here is called the Prince. So who is this prince? Well, this is going to be the topic of chapter 45, verses 21 all the way through chapter 46, verse 12. So we'll hear a little bit more about this tomorrow as well. So we get to verse 5 here, and after the entrance of God into the temple, as when God descended on Mount Sinai, if you remember when that happened, God revealed statutes and laws to his prophet, just like God did when he came down from Mount Sinai. And there are descriptions of these laws again. Now, in verses 7 through 9, this description of the defilement of God's sanctuary may refer to the practice of using foreigners as guards in the temple. We read about that in 2 Kings chapter 11. And also, there was some mention of this in the book of Joshua chapter 9 as well. And then later on, of course, Nehemiah carried out this statute when he dismissed Tobiah in chapter 13 of Nehemiah, who was an Ammonite. So he was a foreigner that was a guard. So Nehemiah got rid of him by following these rules. We get into some of the priestly duties here. And of course, the Zadokites, they're the priests at this point. When the Zadokites entered the sanctuary, they had to be appropriately dressed. I found that to be kind of interesting. They couldn't service God unless they were wearing the appropriate stuff. And one of the things was they could not wear wool. That was a completely forbidden thing to do because the material would cause them to sweat or perspire. And sweat, just like any other bodily secretions, was considered to be a defiling thing, something that was defiling to the sanctuary and to God. And then, of course, other rules about their behavior are going to be given. Verses 28 through 30, the statement that the priests were not to own land, and God says, I am their inheritance. This was identical to the Mosaic law that had already happened. And we saw that in Numbers 18, Deuteronomy 10, Joshua 13, and Joshua 18. So that brings us to our next amazing chapter. Chapter 45. So here we are in Ezekiel. They start out with these allotments, right? Portioning out the land. Verses 1 here and 2 say this, and I found this very interesting. When you divide the land by lot as an inheritance, set aside a donation to the Lord, a holy portion of the land, 8 1/3 miles long and 6 2/3 miles wide. This entire region will be holy. In this area, there will be a square section for the sanctuary, 875 by 875 feet, with 87.5 feet of open space all around it. Remember, we talked about where that was yesterday, right? Where that the Dome of the Rock sits today, there is no way that area would be big enough for this size of a holy. Can you imagine bulldozing 8 1/3 miles long strip and a 6 2/3 mile wide portion right there in the middle of Jerusalem? It's one of the things that makes me think that's probably not where it's going to be, if it's physically ever going to be there. And that's what brings us to this next section here about the prince, once we get to that. So how would that holy temple number 3 fit in the area of Jerusalem where Jerusalem is today? I'm not sure that it would. But in Ezekiel, the allotments of the land here were aligned with the east and west orientation of the temple. This differed from the divisions after the conquest in Joshua's time. So it was kind of different there. The allotments of the land is outlined in greater detail in chapter 47 and 48, and we'll get to that. The designation of the Levite settlements as towns, if you recall, or cities in those Levitical cities that were talked about in Numbers chapter 35. The designations of these towns are a little different here as well. The centralization of the priests in this new arrangement contrasts with the rest of the Old Testament history, where the priests and the Levites were scattered throughout the lands. You notice they had all their own little individual cities. Well, here they just have this one big strip right next to the Holy Land strip. So they're all kind of clustered into one section of land. It's a big section of land, but they're all crammed in that one section, as opposed to spread out all over the land. Now, on either side of the central district there, the prince would also have land, and he would oversee the division of land to the tribes. Now, we get to verse 9 here, and this stood out to me. This is what the Lord God says: "You have gone too far, Prince of Israel." Well, back then, Israel, political leaders had disregarded the rights of others throughout their entire history. So, for God to say this, Prince of Israel, that means to me a political leader. Some people, mostly Jewish, believe the prince that is in this section is actually the Messiah. So from Christian theology, the Messiah was this perfect person, this person that was without sin. So if this prince were to be the Messiah, why would God be chastising this person, saying, "You have gone too far. Put away violence and oppression and do what is just and right. Put an end to your evictions of my people"? This is not something the Messiah would do. Biblically, you don't see a Messiah anywhere in here that comes in and kicks people out and oppresses people. And that's not who the Messiah is. So how the Jews can look at this prince as the Messiah, especially the prince that's mentioned here in Ezekiel, is beyond me. I don't see how that is possible. So the law warned against cheating people with false weights and measurements as we go through here. And of course, holiness in the temple required just, standardized, and honest measurements as well. So it wasn't just cheating the people, but it was also making sure that everything was right and good and holy, and that this person did the right thing. And the people had their own responsibilities as well. These responsibilities were not just for the prince and just the Levites and the priests. This was also for the people. They had to make their regular contributions to the prince for the operation of this sacrificial system that was going to be put together. And that's another one of those problems that comes up biblically that we talk about, is the fact that the prince himself, in verses 21 and 22, will make a sin offering for himself. Now, to me, that shows that the prince here was not the promised Messiah, as Judaism would claim in Ezekiel. Most Jews claim that the prince here is the Messiah, and through this third temple is the Messianic age where the Messiah would rule. Well, if the Messiah is this perfect person from Christian theology, there's no way this can be the Messiah. At least that's from my perspective. That's what I have for you today. What do you think about it? What do you think about this prince? What do you think about this section? What do you think about this third holy temple? And what about those sacrifices? If Jesus was that final sacrifice, so we wouldn't have to make sacrifices anymore, then why would a third temple be built and sacrifices start back up again? Why would that happen? I don't see that it will. I see this more as a symbolic holy place. I don't necessarily see it as a physical on earth place, at least from a Christian perspective. What are your thoughts? Let's see. I hope this has touched you. If it has, click the like button, subscribe button, and of course click that little jingle bell so you get notified the next time I upload a video. And hit that little boxing glove so you can rumble with me on Rumble. And I hope this has spurred some questions and some thinking on your behalf, your part. And I hope it guides you to dig in a little deeper and maybe get some answers to those questions. I know it did for me. I watched several videos from Jewish rabbis that explain this from a Jewish perspective. And then I watched some videos from people who explained it from a Christian perspective. And they definitely clash. It's definitely a clashing moment of biblical theology when it comes to Judaism versus Christianity. So, what do you think? I hope to see you tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. We'll see you then.